Matric learners are back at school today after a one-week break, while the Basic Education Department's now issued both the regulations and the new school calendar. Government says it wants all children back in school by the end of this month. Basil Manuel is the director of the teaching union NAPTOSA. Basil, good afternoon to you. Thanks for your time once again on this issue. Before we go anywhere, has there been any improvement in the situation at schools during the break? I mean, we were told that schools would be using this time to improve themselves. Is that happening?
Stephen, we are still collecting some statistics in that respect, given that our members have just gotten back. But there are still 3 weeks to go, because the major concern was when the big number of learners come back. Remember that 3 provinces didn't manage to open for the second and third cohort, primarily because they didn't have those PPEs, including water and masks and basic things like that. And we have asked for an urgent meeting so that we can see the plan, so that we can see the progress, and so that we can also advise and put our weight behind this. We don't want to get to the 24th and stand head to head against the department again about things not done. We want them done right now.
Okay, should the Matric break have been longer? Was a week enough? And I know that they actually have been at school for quite a long time. Everyone else hasn't.
Well, in fact, you see, Stephen, it's the difference between negotiations and, of course, consultation. In our consultations, we did make a plea for a longer extension. Of course, there are many, many other voices, so ours wasn't necessarily the one that was heard or listened to. Particularly our principals of high schools haven't had a break at all, because they were there last week because they had to prepare things, and this week, of course, the Matrics come back. So on them too it's unfair. But we have what we have now, and we are working within that. But we are also concerned that we mustn't see burnout, particularly in the Matrics that are pressurized at this time because they had missed out during the hard lockdown. They didn't have additional lessons, and they, in particular, are our great concern now about pressure, mental pressure, and, of course, also just catching up with the sheer amount of work that is there.
I've got to tell you, Basil, if I were the parent of Matric, I'd be saying, well, listen, you're going to have a very long break afterwards, because, as I understand it, schools are going to break up on the 15th of December. They're only going to get the results in the middle of February, which means they aren't going to higher education until after that.
Stephen, no, just a correction. Remember that the matriculants will only finish writing exams on the 22nd of December. So, in fact, the others have to finish by the 15th. So, yes, it will be a long break, and we still have to figure out what higher education is going to do in terms of starting the year a little later, because they've already indicated that they're going to do that.
Okay, the proper school calendar now, we've seen it. We expect all children to be back at school at the end of August. Is that realistic at this stage?
Provided, Stephen, that all the other issues have been met. We don't want to see gaps. We want to see the learners back, and it's essential that they get back so that we save some learning and that we have something to base the progression of learners on. But there are many, many bridges to cross, and of course the most important of these, of course, is whether the schools would have been readied in terms of PPEs, cleanliness and the like, the things that separate us from contracting the virus.
Okay, I mean, there is, and this conversation keeps coming back. The Northern Cape still has fewer than 2,000 cases of COVID-19. Gauteng has, over 170,000. At the same time, we're seeing different peaks in different places. The Western Cape provincial government, and I realize that there's very complicated politics here, Basil, but the Western Cape provincial government is saying, look, we're past the peak in terms of official numbers. We need to have what they call a differentiated approach. And in fact, the President referred to that at one point. Is it time to take that a little more seriously, or do you think with education, actually, we have to treat all children equally no matter what?
Stephen, the differentiated approach, unfortunately, favors certain groups. And whilst it sounds logical at one level, at another level, one always remembers that the group we are talking about being left behind are the groups that don't have the resources, are the groups that have been neglected all along. And hence there's that level. Then there's the differentiation between provinces, and some provinces are better off than other provinces. And it goes on and on. It's a very difficult debate. We've thrown our weight behind the fact that says, let's try and have egalitarian type of society where we try and treat everybody the same. And I know that there are counter-arguments to that, but that's where we are at this moment.
Okay, we do need to talk a little bit about crime statistics as well, Basil, and I know you probably hate to talk more about crime. Let me put it another way. You probably can't stand talking about crime and children. I know I can't, but you have to deal with this quite often. We saw crime statistics being released on Friday, and we're seeing again the huge impact of crime on children, and that's reflected in our schools sometimes.
Absolutely, Stephen. We are really taken aback by the fact that in total there are 15,700 children that have committed serious crimes, including murder and sexual offences, etc. And these are children that we teach every day. So the call is not for greater security or scanning devices. We are saying let's find the root of the problem. And part of that is that we don't have assistants at school, such as school psychologists, such as counsellors, where we can prevent these from happening. And this has been one of our nagging problems for many, many years. And now maybe we need to sit up and look a little closer. In total, 25,000 children are involved in some criminal activity or the other and have been charged in terms of the stats released. And that's shocking.
I mean, we've seen in the last 18 months, we've seen actually at least one teacher that I know of being stabbed to death by a learner. I think it was in the Northwest. What we're seeing is the violence in our society, in our communities, coming into schools. And we can't kid ourselves here. I mean, exactly the same things happened in certain parts of the United States, one of the richest countries in the world. The fact is that violence in communities goes into schools, and it's very, very hard to stop it. You can have metal detectors, you can have drug tests, you can have all of those things. It's very, very hard to do.
Absolutely, Stephen, and it's a societal problem. So whilst we are saying let's try and tackle the problem before it manifests itself seriously in schools, but of course we need certain things, we also can't forget the parents themselves and the societies the children live in, the high unemployment rate and how that manifests itself in crime as well. And we can't only look at schools, we've got to look at society as a whole, and we've got to look at a process of healing after the violent past that we've had. This has been on the agenda for far too long. Now we need to action it, and there's no better time than now.
Well, in a way, absolutely. But I mean, again, it goes back to communities. It takes a village to grow up a child, to bring up a child, all of those kind of conversations. Do you think the situation is going to get worse, or do you think there is some hope?
I think with the high level of unemployment and so many of our youngsters being unemployed, it's easy to fall into the trap of crime. So I think we are going to see some badder or worse situation, sorry for the language, a worse situation coming about before it gets better. But I think there are sufficient good people out there that are trying to do the right thing. We also need, as a collective government, to come to the party to see that it is not about crying for additional staff. It is about crying for the right type of staff to address a problem that the ordinary teacher is unable to address. They just have too much to do at any rate.